The storm hit the coast harder than anyone expected that night. Dr. Alex Rivera had seen plenty of rough weather during his 15 years working at the Marine Research Station. But this one felt different. The wind howled like a wild animal, and the waves crashed against the rocky shore with such force that the entire building shook. Alex was supposed to go home hours ago, but he stayed behind to check on his equipment. The storm could damage months of research if water got into the wrong places. He moved through the empty hallways with just a flashlight, listening to the thunder rolling overhead like bowling balls in the sky. That's when he heard something strange. Between the crashes of thunder, there was another sound. Didn't belong. It sounded almost like someone calling for help, but that was impossible. Nobody would be crazy enough to be outside in weather like this. Alex stopped walking and listened carefully. There it was again. Definitely a voice. And it was coming from the beach. He grabbed his raincoat and rushed outside into the storm. The wind immediately tried to knock him over, and the rain felt like tiny needles hitting his face. He could barely see anything, but he followed the sound toward the water's edge. What he found changed everything. There, lying on the wet sand like a broken seashell, was a woman. She wasn't moving, and for a terrible moment Alex thought she might be dead. But as he got closer, he could see her chest rising and falling slowly. She was breathing, but barely. Alex knelt down beside her, and that's when he noticed how strange she looked. Her skin was so pale it almost seemed to glow in the darkness, like moonlight on water. Her hair was long and silver, not gray like an old person's hair, but actually silver like metal. And her clothes, they weren't like anything he'd ever seen before. The fabric looked like it was made from liquid metal that had been turned into cloth. When the lightning flashed, her outfit seemed to change colors, shifting from deep blue to green to purple. It should have been impossible. But Alex was seeing it with his own eyes. He checked for injuries, but couldn't find any cuts or broken bones. She just seemed exhausted, like she had been swimming for days. Her breathing was steady but shallow, and her skin felt cold to the touch. Alex knew he had to get her inside before the storm got worse. Carefully, he lifted her up. She was surprisingly light, almost like she weighed less than she should. He carried her back to the research station, struggling against the wind and rain every step of the way. Inside, Alex laid her down on the couch in his office and grabbed some blankets from the emergency supply closet. He turned on the heater and made some hot tea, not sure what else to do. He had basic first aid training. But this situation wasn't covered in any manual he'd ever read. While he waited for her to wake up, Alex couldn't stop staring at her. Up close, he noticed even more unusual things. Her fingers were longer than normal, and her nails had a strange blue tint. Her ears came to slight points at the top, so subtle he almost missed it. And when she breathed, it seemed like she was taking in much more air than a regular person would need around midnight. She finally opened her eyes. Alex had seen many different eye colors in his life, but never anything like hers. They were the color of deep ocean water. Blue and green swirled together, tiny flecks of silver that seemed to move like schools of fish. When she saw him, she sat up quickly, looking around the room with fear and confusion. "It's okay," Alex said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe now. I found you on the beach during the storm." The woman stared at him for a long moment, then tried to speak. What came out was unlike any language Alex had ever heard. It sounded musical, like whale songs mixed with the sound of wind through sea caves. Her voice rose and fell in patterns that felt familiar somehow. Even though he couldn't understand a single word, she pointed to herself and made a sound that might have been her name, but Alex couldn't repeat it. Then she looked toward the window, where rain was still hitting the glass, and her eyes filled with something that looked like panic. "It's all right," Alex said, moving slowly so he wouldn't scare her. "The storm will pass. You're hurt and you need rest." She shook her head and tried to stand up, but her legs gave out immediately. Alex caught her before she could fall, and when their hands touched, something incredible happened. For just a moment, he could swear he heard her thoughts, not in words, but in feelings and images. He saw flashes of underwater cities, with buildings that looked like coral reefs. He felt the sensation of swimming through water so deep that sunlight couldn't reach it. And underneath it all, there was a desperate need to return to something important, something she had lost. The connection lasted only a second, then it was gone, leaving Alex wondering if he had imagined the whole thing. But the woman was looking at him differently now, like she knew he had felt something too. Over the next few hours, Alex tried to help her communicate. He brought her water, which she drank eagerly, and offered her food from his lunch bag. She looked at the sandwich like she had never seen bread before, sniffing it carefully before taking tiny bites. What really caught his attention was how she reacted to his aquarium. The research station had several tanks with local fish species, and when she saw them, her whole face lit up. She walked over to the largest tank and placed her hands against the glass. The fish, which normally swam in random patterns, suddenly began moving together in perfect formations. They created spirals and waves, dancing through the water like they were performing just for her. Alex had been studying marine life for his entire career, but he had never seen anything like it. The woman turned to him and smiled. The first real expression of happiness he had seen from her. Act. She pointed to the fish, then to herself, then toward the ocean outside. Without words, Alex was starting to understand. She wasn't from around here. In fact, she might not be from anywhere on land at all. As the storm finally began to calm down outside, Alex realized he had to make a decision. The normal thing to do would be to call the authorities, maybe take her to a hospital or contact immigration services. But looking at her now, watching how the fish responded to her presence, he knew that would be a mistake. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she deserved better than being treated like a problem to be solved. She was scared, lost, and trying to find her way home. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, Alex felt responsible for helping her get there. He just had to figure out how. The next morning brought sunshine and calm waters, but Alex's life was anything but peaceful. He had barely slept, spending most of the night watching over his mysterious guest. She had finally fallen asleep around dawn, curled up on the couch, like she was trying to make herself as small as possible. Alex made coffee and tried to think clearly about his situation. He was a scientist, trained to observe and analyze everything logically. But nothing about this woman made logical sense. Her strange appearance, the way fish responded to her, and that brief moment when he felt like he could read her thoughts, it all seemed impossible. When she woke up, she looked much better. Her skin had more color and her eyes weren't filled with the same panic as before. She sat up slowly and looked around the research station with curiosity instead of fear. "Good morning," Alex said gently, offering her a cup of water. "How are you feeling?" Then she pointed to herself and made that musical sound again, her name that Alex still couldn't pronounce. He decided to try something different. Alex pulled out a notebook and drew a simple picture of a person, then pointed to himself. "Alex," he said clearly. Then he drew another figure and pointed to her. Her face brightened with understanding. She took the pencil from his hand. Her grip was different, like she wasn't used to holding human tools, and drew something that looked like flowing water with bubbles floating through it. The drawing was beautiful and detailed, even though she had never used a pencil before. Alex studied the image. It looked like she was trying to show him something underwater. He drew the ocean, with waves on top and fish swimming below. The woman's eyes lit up, and she nodded eagerly. This became their way of talking.
Oh.
Over the next few hours, they filled pages with drawings. Alex learned that her name sounded something like Kira when he tried to say it, though he knew he wasn't pronouncing it right. She seemed to understand that he was trying, and that was enough. Kira drew more underwater scenes, cities that looked like they were made of coral and seaweed, with tall spires that twisted like kelp forests. She showed him creatures that Alex didn't recognize, fish with multiple fins and jellyfish that glowed like lanterns. When she drew her home, her whole face changed. She looked homesick and sad, but the most amazing thing happened when Alex took her to see more of the research station. They had a large observation deck that overlooked the ocean. And when Kira saw the water stretching out to the horizon, she ran to the railing. She stood there for almost an hour, just watching the waves. Alex noticed that she seemed to be following patterns in the water that he couldn't see. Every few minutes, she would point to a specific spot on the ocean and make excited sounds. "What is it?" Alex asked. "What do you see out there?" Kira grabbed his notebook and drew frantically. She showed him the ocean with lines moving through it like invisible currents. Then she drew the moon and the sun, with arrows showing how they moved across the sky. Finally, she drew what looked like a clock, but instead of numbers, it had symbols that reminded Alex of star charts. It took him a while to understand, but when he did, it amazed him. Kira was predicting the tides, not just regular tides, that any sailor could figure out, but tiny changes in water movement that would happen hours or even days later. To test this, Alex checked his computer against her drawings. According to his scientific instruments, she was right about everything. Every wave pattern, every current shift, every change in water temperature, she knew it all just by looking at the ocean. "How do you know this?" Alex whispered, more to himself than to her. Kira seemed to understand his amazement. She drew a picture of herself in the water, surrounded by fish and sea plants. Then she drew lines connecting her to everything in the ocean, like she was part of a huge web of life under the waves. As the day went on, Alex discovered more incredible things about his guest. When they visited the main aquarium room, something magical happened. The fish didn't just swim in formations like before. They actually seemed to be communicating with her. Kira would make soft sounds, almost like humming, and the fish would respond by changing their swimming patterns. It was like watching a conversation that Alex couldn't understand but could somehow feel. The most shocking moment came when Kira asked to touch the water in one of the tanks. Alex hesitated. The fish were part of important research, but something in her eyes made him trust her. She put her hand in the water, and immediately every fish in the tank swam toward her. They didn't seem scared at all. Instead, they gently brushed against her fingers like cats, rubbing against someone they loved. Then Kira did something that made Alex's heart stop. She put her whole arm in the water, then her head. She stayed underwater for 2 minutes, then 3, then 5. Alex was about to pull her out when she finally lifted her head, smiling and completely calm. "You can breathe underwater," Alex said, barely believing his own words. Kira nodded and drew a picture of herself, swimming deep below the surface. Surrounded by fish and coral, she drew lungs, but they looked different from human lungs. More like the gills of a fish, but hidden inside her body. As evening approached, Kira became restless. She kept looking toward the ocean and drawing the same symbols over and over, stars and moons and flowing water. Alex realized she was trying to tell him about time, about when something important would happen. She drew herself walking into the ocean, then pointed to a spot on her star chart. Alex counted the symbols and figured out she was talking about 5 days from now. Whatever she was waiting for, it would happen in 5 days. But as the hours passed, Alex could see that waiting was hard for her. She paced around the research station like a caged animal, constantly moving toward windows that faced the sea. Sometimes she would make soft, sad sounds that reminded Alex of whales calling to each other across vast distances. He started to understand that keeping her here, even to help her, might be causing her pain. She wasn't just homesick, she was like a fish out of water, literally. Every moment away from the ocean was difficult for her. That night, as Kira slept fitfully on the couch, Alex made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't keep her here against her will, no matter how curious he was about where she came from. If she needed to return to the ocean, then he would help her get there. Even if it meant he might never see her again. Even if it meant losing the most incredible discovery of his scientific career. Some things, Alex realized, were more important than answers. Sometimes the right thing to do was simply to trust and let go. The decision kept Alex awake for 2 more nights. Every time he looked at Kira, he could see she was getting weaker. Not physically, her body seemed fine, but something deeper was fading. It was like watching a flower that had been cut from its roots, still beautiful, but slowly dying. On the 3rd day, Kira stopped eating altogether. She spent hours sitting by the window, staring at the ocean with such longing that it made Alex's heart hurt. Sometimes she would press her hand against the glass and make those soft, musical sounds that reminded him of whale songs. Alex realized she might be trying to call out to someone or something in the deep water. That evening, she drew him a new picture. This one was different from all the others. It showed her walking into the ocean, but she wasn't alone. In the water, there were shapes, other beings like her waiting. Some looked worried, others seemed to be searching. In the corner of the drawing, she had sketched what looked like a calendar with several days crossed out. "They're looking for you," Alex said quietly. "Your family, your people, they don't know where you are." Kira nodded, tears forming in her unusual eyes. She pointed to the crossed-out days, then held up 2 fingers. Alex understood. She had been missing for 5 days already, and her people had been searching all that time. He made up his mind right then. No matter how much he wanted to study her, no matter how many questions he still had, keeping her here was wrong. Shh. Wasn't a science experiment. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone who was desperately needed somewhere else. "I'll help you get home," Alex told her. The change in Kira was immediate. The sadness in her eyes was replaced by hope. And for the first time since that first morning, she smiled a real smile. She grabbed his hands in hers. Her skin was cool and smooth like sea glass, and made a sound that he knew meant, "Thank you." That night, Alex spent hours studying Kira's star charts and ocean maps. She had drawn the same location over and over. A spot about 2 miles offshore where the water was deepest. According to his research equipment, it was directly above an underwater canyon that dropped down thousands of feet. Alex had a small research boat that he used for collecting samples. It wasn't fancy, but it would get them to the right coordinates. He spent the next morning preparing everything, checking the engine, loading supplies, making sure the GPS was working perfectly. Kira watched him work with growing excitement. She seemed to understand what he was planning, and she helped in ways that surprised him. She could tie knots that Alex had never seen before, strong and beautiful like works of art. When she touched the boat's compass, it started working better than it had in years. As evening approached, Alex felt his nervousness growing. He was about to take a mysterious woman to a remote spot in the ocean and let her disappear into water so deep that no human could survive in it. Part of him worried that he might be helping her hurt herself, but when he looked at her face, he knew he was doing the right thing. The sun was setting when they finally set out. The ocean was calm, painted gold and orange by the dying light. Kira stood at the front of the boat, her strange clothes rippling in the sea breeze. She pointed the way, making small, coarse corrections that were more accurate than Alex's GPS. As they got farther from shore, something incredible began to happen. The water around their boat started to glow, not bright like electric lights, but soft and blue like captured moonlight. Alex had seen bioluminescent algae before, but never like this. The glow seemed to be following them, creating a path of light on the dark water. "Is that them?" Alex asked, pointing to the glowing water. "Your people?" Kira nodded excitedly and made a series of musical sounds. The glow in the water pulsed in response, like it was answering her. Alex realized he was witnessing a conversation between Kira and whoever was waiting for her below the waves. When they reached the coordinates Kira had marked, she turned to Alex with an expression he would never forget. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also sadness. She knew this was goodbye, and so did he. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a piece of the strange fabric from her clothes. It was no bigger than a coin, but it shimmered with all the colors of the ocean. She pressed it into Alex's hand, and when their skin touched, he felt that connection again. This time the feeling was stronger. He saw flashes of her world, vast underwater cities, with towers that spiraled up toward distant light. Gardens of sea plants more beautiful than any coral reef, and creatures that moved through the water like living jewels. He felt her gratitude, warm and deep like ocean currents. And underneath it all, he sensed a promise that this wasn't really goodbye. Kira stepped to the edge of the boat and paused. She looked back at Alex one more time, placed her hand over her heart, then pointed. To him, even without words, he understood. She was saying that she would remember his kindness forever. Then she dove. It wasn't like watching a human dive into water. Kira moved like she was born for this, slicing through the surface without even a splash. As soon as she entered the water, the bioluminescent glow exploded around her like fireworks. The entire ocean seemed to light up in celebration. Alex leaned over the side of the boat, trying to see where she had gone. For a moment, he could make out her silhouette swimming down, through the glowing water, moving faster than any human could swim. Then she was joined by other shapes, her people, welcoming her home. The light show continued for several minutes. Pulses of blue and green and silver racing through the water in patterns too beautiful to describe. Alex. A reunion celebration, and even though he couldn't be part of it, he was honored to witness it. Gradually the lights faded, and the ocean returned to its normal dark blue. Alex sat in his boat for a long time, holding the small piece of fabric Kira had given him. It still felt warm, and when he held it up to the moonlight, it seemed to pulse with its own gentle glow. The trip back to shore was quiet and lonely. Alex kept looking back at the spot where Kira had disappeared, but there was nothing to see except normal ocean waves. As he tied up his boat at the dock, he wondered if he had imagined the whole thing, but the fabric in his pocket proved it was real. That and the way his heart felt both empty and full at the same time. He had lost the most incredible discovery of his life, but he had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that he had done the right thing. That night, Alex sat in his empty research station and looked out at the dark ocean. Somewhere out there, Kira was home with her family, safe and happy. And that was worth more than any scientific discovery could ever be. The first day after Kira left felt like the longest day of Alex's life. He woke up expecting to see her sleeping on the couch, but found only empty cushions and silence. The research station felt bigger somehow, like all the space she had filled, with her presence, had suddenly become hollow. Alex tried to go back to his normal routine. He checked his equipment, recorded data from his experiments, and answered emails from other scientists. But everything felt different now. The fish in his tanks swam in ordinary patterns again. His instruments gave him the same boring readings they always had. The magic that had filled his workplace for 5 days was completely gone. By afternoon, he couldn't concentrate on anything. Every few minutes, he found himself walking to the window that faced the ocean, searching the waves for any sign of the glowing lights he had seen the night before. But the water looked perfectly normal, just regular blue waves rolling toward shore under a cloudy sky. His colleague, Dr. Rodriguez, stopped by around lunchtime to check on a joint project they were working on. She noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You look terrible," she said, studying Alex's face with concern. "Are you getting sick? You've got dark circles under your eyes like you haven't slept in a week." "I'm fine," Alex lied, turning away from her curious stare. "Just tired. The storm a few days ago kept me up." "That was almost a week ago," Rodriguez pointed out. "Maybe you should take some time off. You've been working too hard lately." Alex nodded and made some excuse about feeling better soon, but he knew Rodriguez wasn't convinced. How could he explain that he was mourning the loss of a friend she would never believe existed? That evening, Alex walked down to the beach, where he had first found Kira. The sand looked completely normal, with no trace that anything unusual had ever happened there. He sat on a piece of driftwood and watched the sunset, feeling more alone than he had in years. As darkness fell, something strange began to happen. The waves washing up on shore started to glow faintly, just at the edges where they touched the sand. At first, Alex thought he might be imagining it, maybe. He wanted to see something so badly that his mind was playing tricks on him, but the glow grew stronger as the night got darker. Soon, each wave that reached the beach was outlined in soft blue light that lasted for a few seconds before fading away. Alex had never seen anything like it, not in all his years of studying ocean life. He knelt down to get a closer look at the glowing water. When he touched it, the light swirled around his fingers like liquid starlight. It felt warm and tingly, almost alive. Alex collected a sample in a small bottle to study later, but somehow he knew his instruments wouldn't be able to explain what was causing this phenomenon. The second day brought even stranger occurrences. Alex arrived at work to find that several pieces of equipment that had been broken for months were suddenly working perfectly. The old microscope that always had a blurry lens was now crystal clear. The water filtration system that constantly needed repairs was running smoothly. Even the coffee machine, which had been making terrible coffee for years, was now brewing perfect cups. Alex checked and double-checked everything, but he couldn't find any explanation for the improvements. Nothing had been repaired or replaced. The equipment was just ... better. Like someone with incredible knowledge had somehow fixed everything overnight. The third day, the fish started acting strange, not just in Alex's tanks, but all along the coastline. Local fishermen reported that schools of fish were swimming in perfect formations, creating patterns in the water that looked almost like writing. Dolphins were gathering in unusually large groups, and whales could be heard singing more frequently than normal. Alex watched his own fish with amazement. They had gone back to their ordinary swimming patterns after Kira left. But now they were creating even more complex designs than before. They moved like they were dancing to music only they could hear, forming spirals and waves and shapes that reminded him of the symbols Kira used to draw. On the fourth night, Alex made a discovery that took his breath away. As he walked along the beach during his evening routine, he noticed something incredible in the sand. There, stretching for hundreds of feet along the shoreline, were patterns made of glowing algae, but these weren't random patches of bioluminescence. The algae had arranged itself into perfect spirals and flowing curves, creating designs that looked exactly like the star charts and ocean maps Kira had drawn in his notebook. The patterns were so precise and beautiful that they looked like artwork, created by someone with incredible skill. Alex knew this shouldn't be possible. Algae didn't arrange itself into deliberate patterns. It grew randomly, following currents and nutrients and temperature changes. But here it was, creating pictures that could only be messages. He spent hours studying the glowing patterns, trying to understand what they meant. Some looked like maps of the ocean floor. Others resembled star constellations. Few showed the phases of the moon and the movement of tides. It was like someone was trying to teach him about the secret connections between the sea and the sky. As Alex traced the glowing designs with his flashlight, he realized something that made his heart race. These patterns appeared in the exact spot where he had first found Kira after the storm. Someone or something had created this display right where their story began, but the most amazing part was yet to come. As Alex watched, new patterns began to form in the sand. The algae was actually moving, flowing like water to create fresh designs right before his eyes. It was impossible, but it was happening. The new patterns showed images that made Alex's breath catch in his throat. There was a picture of himself, clearly recognizable, even though it was made of tiny glowing organisms. Next to it was an image of Kira, her flowing hair and unusual clothing perfectly captured in living light. Between the two figures, algae formed symbols that looked like hearts and stars in flowing water. Alex didn't need to be a scientist to understand this message. It was saying that their friendship had mattered, that the connection they shared was still alive somehow. The final image was the most mysterious of all. It showed the research station, where Alex worked, but with streams of light flowing from it toward the ocean. The light seemed to represent knowledge or information traveling between the land and the sea. Alex stared at this pattern for a long time, wondering what it could mean. As dawn approached, the glowing algae gradually faded back to normal. The beautiful patterns dissolved into ordinary patches of sea life, scattered randomly across the sand. But Alex knew what he had seen was real, and more importantly, he understood what it meant. Kira hadn't forgotten him. Somehow, from wherever she was in the deep ocean, she was sending him messages. The repaired equipment, the strange fish behavior, and now these incredible algae patterns. They were all signs that their connection hadn't been broken when she returned to the water. Alex walked back to the research station as the sun came up, feeling hopeful for the first time since Kira had left. He didn't know what these signs meant or what might happen next, but he knew he wasn't alone anymore. Something wonderful was about to happen. He could feel it in the way the morning breeze carried the scent of deep ocean water, in the way that waves seemed to whisper secrets as they touched the shore. Kira was trying to tell him something important. Alex intended to listen. On the seventh night after Kira's departure, Alex couldn't sleep. Something felt different about the evening. The air was charged with energy like the moments before a thunderstorm. But the sky was clear, filled with more stars than he had ever seen before. Even the ocean seemed calmer than usual, as if the whole world was holding its breath around midnight. Alex gave up trying to sleep and walked down to the beach. He had been making this trip every night since Kira left, hoping to see more of those mysterious algae patterns. But tonight, as he approached the water's edge, he saw something that made his heart stop. There, rising from the waves like a dream, was Kira. But she wasn't the same frightened, lost woman he had found a week ago. This Kira moved with confidence and grace, walking across the water as if it were solid ground. The ocean around her feet glowed with soft light, creating a pathway of stars leading from the deep sea to the shore. She was no longer alone. Swimming alongside her in the shallow water were creatures Alex had never seen before, beings that looked like they were made of living light, had the basic shape of humans, but their skin glowed with the same gentle radiance as the ocean around them. Their hair flowed like seaweed, and when they moved, they left trails of sparkling bubbles in the water as Kira stepped onto the beach. Alex noticed she was carrying something in her hands. It was a crystal unlike anything he had ever seen, clear as glass, but filled with swirling patterns of blue and green light that moved like miniature storms captured in stone. "Alex," Kira said, and her voice was clearer now, more human-sounding than before. During their time apart, she had somehow learned to speak his language better. "I told you I would return." "You came back," Alex whispered, barely believing his own eyes. "I hoped you would, but I didn't know if... You gave me the greatest gift possible," Kira said, walking closer to him. "You gave me my freedom when you could have kept me for study. You chose my happiness over your curiosity. That is rare among land dwellers." Alex looked at the glowing beings still swimming in the shallow water behind her. "Are they your family?" "Some are family, others are friends and teachers," Kira explained. "We have been watching your people for many generations, Alex. Most humans see the ocean as something to use or conquer, but you saw it as something to respect and protect. That is why we have decided to trust you." She held up the crystal, and Alex could see that the swirling lights inside it were incredibly complex, like looking at a living map of ocean currents, weather patterns, and underwater ecosystems all moving together in perfect harmony. "This is our gift to you," Kira said. "It contains knowledge that your people need to understand the ocean properly, not to control it, but to work with it." Alex reached out carefully and took the crystal from her hands. The moment his fingers touched it, an incredible sensation flooded through his mind. Suddenly, he could see the ocean the way Kira's people saw it, as a living, breathing entity with its own intelligence and purpose. He saw how pollution traveled through underwater currents, affecting sea life thousands of miles away from where it started. He understood how overfishing in one area could destroy the food chain across entire regions. Most importantly, he saw how small changes in ocean temperature and chemistry could affect weather patterns around the entire planet. But the crystal didn't just show him problems, it showed him solutions. Alex saw new ways to clean polluted water using special types of algae. He learned about underwater farming techniques that could feed millions of people without harming the environment. The knowledge flowing into his mind was more advanced than anything human science had discovered. "Why are you giving this to me?" Alex asked, when the visions finally stopped. "Why not 2 governments or universities? I'm just one person." "Because you proved you can be trusted," one of the other beings said, swimming closer to shore. This one was older than Kira, with silver hair that sparkled like starlight. He had the chance to use Kira for fame and discovery, but instead, "You helped her return home? That shows wisdom we rarely see in your kind." Kira nodded. "We have tried to share knowledge with humans before, but it was always used for profit or power. The ocean became more damaged, not less. But you are different, Alex. You care more about protecting life than gaining recognition." "What am I supposed to do with this?" Alex asked, looking down at the crystal. It felt warm in his hands, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "Share the knowledge slowly and carefully," the elder being explained. Choose people you trust, those who care about the oceans. Health, more than their own advancement. Let the information spread naturally, like ripples in water. But be careful, Kira warned. There are those among your people who would use this knowledge for harmful purposes. Trust your instincts about who to share it with. Alex nodded, understanding the enormous responsibility he was being given. This wasn't just scientific information. It was the key to saving the oceans and possibly the entire planet. Will I see you again? Alex asked Kira. She smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the frightened woman he had found on the beach. When you need guidance, come to the water's edge at midnight and hold the crystal toward the moon. We will know, and if we can, we will come. And if the knowledge in the crystal helps heal even one small part of the ocean, the elder added, then our gift will have been worthwhile. As dawn began to color the eastern sky, Kira and her companions prepared to leave. But before she walked back into the waves, Kira did something unexpected. She hugged Alex, and in that moment of contact, he felt the deep gratitude and friendship of not just her, but her entire people. Thank you for showing us that not all humans are the same, she whispered. Your kindness gives us hope for the future. Then she was gone, walking back across the glowing water with her companions until they disappeared beneath the waves. But this time, Alex didn't feel sad watching her leave. Instead, he felt honored and excited about the work ahead of him. As the sun rose over the ocean, Alex looked down at the crystal in his hands. It was still glowing softly, filled with more knowledge than any human had ever possessed about the sea. I thought about all the ways this information could help heal the damage that had been done to the oceans over the centuries. Alex walked back to his research station with purpose in his steps. He had work to do, important work that could change the world. And for the first time in his career, he felt like his research might actually make a difference. He spent the rest of the morning carefully documenting everything that had happened, taking detailed notes about the crystal and the knowledge it contained. Then he began the careful process of figuring out who he could trust with this incredible gift. The ocean was depending on him now, and Alex was determined not to let it down. He had been chosen for this responsibility because of his kindness and wisdom, and he intended to prove that their trust had been well-placed. As he worked, Alex kept glancing out at the sea, knowing that somewhere in its depths, Kira and her people were watching and hoping. The future of both their worlds now rested in his hands, and that was a responsibility he would carry with pride for the rest of his life.